Hey guys, this is Johan, and we are with Rob and Glenn from the Flakpanzer Restoration Project. If you guys have been following the Facebook group, you'll have seen their names a lot, and you'll have seen a lot of the work we've got on the table here, which is work that they've done on restoring some parts. So what we're going to do is just show off some of the parts that they've refinished, and they'll tell you a bit about some of the work they put in. So Glenn, maybe if you want to go first.
Sure.
And talk about the water pump.
So guys, here we have the water pump for the Flakpanzer engine, fully rebuilt and restored, ready to go. When we started, it was completely rusted, and due to freezing water in it when it was stored, there was a crack back here in the impeller housing that was about the thickness of a credit card. So Rob's father-in-law is a master of welding of cast iron, so he fixed that, and so that's all done. So it's been completely stripped. The bearings in the bearing housing have been both replaced with new German-made SKF bearings. There are 2 new oil seals in here. I've re-shimmed the pump, and you can see the shims in here. So in here, there's a certain amount of space that needs to be here so that when the engine heats up, the impeller doesn't actually touch the housing of the water pump. And also, there needs to be a certain amount of clearance so that it can be efficient. If it's too far away, we won't circulate the water properly, so that's been all done. I replaced all the studs on the gland seal with new studs. All the brass hardware has been chemically cleaned, so it hasn't been sandblasted, hasn't been put to a wire wheel, so it looks original. I redid the data plate without removing it, and basically it is ready to go. It's been painted, everything's good, it turns, so at some point it should be going back on the motor and circulating coolant again. All right guys, so here we have the Flakpanzer sight arm for the gun. Basically what I've done with this is just mocked up. As you can see, there's a section that has been cut off here. The Department of National Defense cut this off because this sits proud of the turret. So when they were putting the vehicle on display, there was no way to collapse this down into the turret and then cap the turret off to keep people out. So they just, nice simple solution, just cut it. We don't know where the parts ended up. They're lost to history. So this still has to be remade. There's a section that comes up probably about this high. It tapers, and then there's a circular housing that has 2 bearings in it, and then there's an arm that goes down to the body of the gun so that when the guns are moving, it keeps these basically moving together and it keeps it nice and solid so there's no chance of any kind of play. The reason for that is this attachment here is where the sight mechanism would go. So this is completely exposed to the elements. This back section of this has been completely rebuilt. This has all been completely rebuilt. So we're at the point now where there's a few other parts missing. There are dials that go on here because these are the fine tune for the sight. It doesn't do a full 360. So there's a stop there. And it stops there.
And the other one?
This one doesn't turn because right now it is engaged with this. So without the knob, I can't turn it because I can't get any leverage on it. But if you turn this one, what would happen is it would adjust this going this way. This one is the adjustment for here. So you could get very precise aiming. All of this was seized, rotten, solid. So a lot of heat, a lot of persuasion, and it finally came apart. And basically, it's still in good shape. So this shaft that goes through here, that controls this axis here, was completely seized because this was open and exposed to the elements. So rainwater, snow, debris, all settled into the bottom of this. And this was completely seized. So in order to get this gear out, you take this cap off, and it should just slip out of here. But because it was seized, this, we got cherry red. It's kind of hard to see, but this tiny thin cap, you unscrew that, and then you have to take that set pin out, and that gear slides out. But even though after sitting for 70 years in the weather, a little bit of heat, a little bit of patience, this came out. And this gear actually is okay. Even though the bottom of it is kind of rotten, it's still structurally okay, so this doesn't need to be replaced. So technically this is finished. But again, the gear that goes through here and meets here, both of those are done. So it's salvageable, and at some point, our friend Chris Chase from the US, who's also doing a flak gun, is going to bring his arm up so that we can pattern this end and a couple other things so we can get it fixed. Other than that, it's in pretty good shape. Everything should function, and it's, like I said, we've completely rebuilt it. It was, like I said, rotten to the core. There was perforations in the arm, but we managed to save it, and that quality German engineering, believe it or not, that was seized solid, and it still turns. All the detents work. This still functions. I built a new dust boot out of leather for this like it was at the factory, and once we get those gears made and we get this section, we're good to go.
Okay, so Glenn talked about the small sidearm and where it mounts to. It mounts on what we were referring to as the large sight arm. It would mount here on this thing here. So we've taken it apart. It's apart now simply because we still have to fix this part, as Glenn said. And this wire here goes to this battery box. The battery box inside had to be completely refurbished. All the brass contacts inside and the wiring were all shot. So although the conduit I could reuse, it was actually in good shape, I've run new wires through it. And so this is all rewired. And what this powers is it will come through here, enters into the body here, and there is a plug here for the lighted sight. Here you'll see a large blackout panel. In earlier versions of the Flak 38 there was a computer in this, but in the later ones they eliminated it. So this is just simply hollow in here. Missing from ours was this handle. We had 3 sheared off bolts, and at first we weren't sure what they were for. But Chris Chase in the United States was able to give me an excellent reference photo and showed me what this handle should look like. And I was able to refurbish a new handle for that and had to drill out the old bolts and retap them. But now we have something that'll be easy to, when you're getting in and out of the turret, you have something to grab onto. Also on the bottom here, we weren't sure initially what this was for. And then again, Chris was able to advise us that this is actually a safety harness for for the gunner, in case he, I guess, fell or whatever. It has a data plate here that was restored. Of course, it was a block of rust when we first started working on this. And this whole unit mounts on the rear of the main body of the Flak 38. And you'll see, just as a matter of interest, it still has battle damage, which we don't repair. We leave that for history's sake, obviously. And there's also a matching hole in the small sight arm. One of the other things we worked on were the recoil mechanisms. We have one here. We had to bring this one back to the shop because we just didn't have enough heat to take the stainless steel collar off the end on this particular one. The thread is very fine, and unfortunately in this case the water has gotten into it, sat there, and has corroded the threads. So we had a heck of a time getting this off. We've got it off now, but unfortunately I think these threads may be done. But that's what the interior of this unit here is. This one I was able to restore fully, and it is a recoil mechanism for the gun. Again, you remember the springs that are in here, and then there's a very large spring down in here. And this one here was much better shape. The threads, even though it was still hard to get off, it did come off with a lot less heat than what it took to get this other one off. So there's 4 of these. One is good. Second one's not so good. It's going to need some work. And we have 2 more. Another one in good shape and another one in very poor condition. So we've got some work ahead of us with the recoil mechanisms. I also worked on the traverse gearbox and the elevation gearbox for the main flak guns. And in both cases, the wheels were totally destroyed. I almost think maybe the Department of National Defense did that when they were welding them so that nobody could get inside and move them around. So they took these and they literally broke off half the wheel. It was covered in a Bakelite cover for the handle. It's like a steering wheel. And that, unfortunately, was so badly deteriorated over the years that we've had to take it off completely. So once I took that off, then I knew I had to rebuild the steel skeleton inside. And so that's what you see here, the finished product of the steel skeleton. There's, right now, what isn't on here is a vertical handle, and you would spin the wheels like this for speed. And I'm getting those remachined, and then I will have new upper handles for it as well. And then we're going to have to source somewhere how to replace this material here to make it like a steering wheel again. But at least the steel skeleton is done, and we have something to mount the other stuff on. And that was the main things we worked on. This one plug here, that's the one that goes on the side here for the sight mechanism to plug into, and that won't be resoldered on until this has been repaired and we put the two units back together again. But that kind of kept me busy for the last few weeks. Thanks.